Tonight on Ukraine Today, liberations of the Dnipropetrovsk region. Ukraine's defense forces have deoccupied almost the entire territory of the region from Russian invaders. A phone bargaining session. What did Donald Trump discuss with Vladimir Putin, and did they manage to reach any understanding? Escalation in the Middle East. Iran launched ballistic missiles at a German airbase in Jordan, where US Air Force units are also stationed. All this and more, right now. Hello, I'm Volodymyr Robchun and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and let's begin. Some encouraging news from the battlefield. Ukraine's defense forces have liberated almost the entire territory of the Dnipropetrovsk region. This was announced by Alexander Komarenko, the head of the main operational directorate of Ukraine's general staff. According to him, Ukrainian troops only need to finish the job in 3 small settlements and carry out clearing operations in 2 more. This adds to the broader picture of Ukraine's battlefield successes, especially in the south of the country. More details about the deoccupation in the report.
The armed forces of Ukraine are disrupting the Russians' plans.
Sight set to 400, level 30-0. Kudomir 45. 4, radius reduced. Prepare and fire!
A shot has just been fired.
Ukrainian defenders delivered a powerful strike on Russian targets in temporarily occupied Crimea. A total of 3 sophisticated Pantsir S-1 anti-aircraft missile and gun systems were successfully targeted simultaneously in a single strike. And the occupiers' mobile fire group was completely eliminated and taken out of action. In the area of Novozerne, a high-speed landing craft of the BK-16 project, which the enemy used for maneuvers and to strengthen coastal defenses, was put out of action. Additionally, the Kirovsky airfield was struck. 4 control stations for Orion strike reconnaissance drones and their storage site were destroyed. And that's not all. The middle strike unit of the Special Operations Forces with precise strikes eliminated 4 enemy radar stations on the peninsula, a 5N-84A Oberona 14 radar, a Nebo-U radar, and 2 stations housed in radomes in Yevpatoria. At the same time, an element of the enemy's command post was destroyed in temporarily occupied Zakatovka, Donetsk region. Important targets were also struck in the area of Donetsk airport. The infrastructure used for preparing and launching Shahed attack drones came under the sights of Ukrainian defenders. To accurately destroy these targets, the armed forces of Ukraine used ATACMS and Scalp missiles. As a result, warehouses and UAV preparation points were destroyed, and a large fire and secondary explosions were recorded.
They have started to economize, trying to save on resources, supplies, ammunition, and so on. And this is important, and this speaks to their condition. It shows their current capabilities.
In addition, UAV control points were hit in Dibrova, Luhansk region, and in Krugliakovka, Kharkiv region. At the same time, enemy artillery positions in Tabeljanka, Voskresenka, and Novopalovka were disabled. Strikes also targeted areas where the occupiers' personnel were concentrated: Novohrihorivka and Zheleznodorozhnaya in Zaporizhzhia region, Torske in Donetsk region, and Sopich in Sumy region. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, Ukrainian scouts stopped the enemy's advance. For 3 months in a row, special forces have been holding the line and not allowing the occupiers to approach the regional center. During this time, fighters from the Timurin Special Unit have eliminated more than 300 occupiers, and another 39 have been taken prisoner.
With precise strikes from drones and artillery, military intelligence systematically restricts the logistics capabilities of the Muscovites. Due to a lack of supplies, the occupiers are increasingly refusing to carry out assault operations in this direction. The actions of the special forces made it possible to stabilize the defense along lines advantageous for Ukrainian defenders and to secure Zaporizhzhia.
In parallel with the strikes, the defense forces are reclaiming Ukrainian land. In the south of the country, up to 435 square kilometers of territory have already been liberated from the enemy and are under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine.
What have our armed forces accomplished? In the south of our country, over the past month and a half, they have carried out a number of important defensive actions and in some areas offensive operations. All of these actions were aimed exclusively at disrupting the plans of the Russian Federation. We believe that we have quite successfully regained control over approximately 400 to 435 kilometers.
According to the head of state, Ukrainian defenders held all key defensive positions this winter and achieved significant results on the front line.
Their losses over the past month are greater than the number of troops they bring in. That's the first point. And secondly, the last month already this year, February. So the amount of territory by area that they captured and that our units, our forces recaptured and took back, well, our numbers are higher.
However, despite colossal losses both deep in the rear and on the front line, the Kremlin's plans remain unchanged. Moscow is not giving up on its ambitions and is still betting on a spring offensive. The main goal of the occupiers is eastern Ukraine.
The main objectives are the east of our country, the capture of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Basically, their plans have not changed. There is a delay because they are unable to achieve this with the means and forces they currently have, due to the actions of our armed forces. In addition, the southern direction was also considered.
And while in Moscow they frantically draw new lines of advance on their maps, the reality both at the front and in the rear looks quite different. The Ukrainian army is not only thwarting the enemy's plans, but is also gradually seizing the initiative, destroying logistics, knocking out air defense systems, reclaiming territory, and holding key positions.
Over the past 24 hours, Russia has lost at least 950 occupiers killed and wounded. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Russian losses have reached 1,274,990 troops. In addition, during the last day, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 13 Russian tanks, 7 armored combat vehicles, 73 artillery systems, and dozens of other pieces of enemy military equipment. Unfortunately, there is also sad news. In an air battle, hero of Ukraine Alexander Dovgach, commander of the 39 Tactical Aviation Brigade, was killed. Since the start of the full-scale Russian invasion, he carried out hundreds of combat missions. He fought in the battle for the Kyiv, Kharkiv and Kherson regions, and also took part in operations around Zmyny Island. Eternal memory. Putin's terrorists struck the center of Slovyansk with 3 guided aerial bombs. At least 2 people were killed and 11 were injured, including a 14-year-old girl. At least 6 apartment buildings were damaged. 10 people were injured as a result of a Russian strike in the Dnipropetrovsk region. The enemy attacked with drones and artillery. Apartment buildings, an administrative building and a car were damaged. Earlier, Russian forces also struck Kharkiv with a drone. 4 people were injured. 3 private homes were damaged. A meeting between representatives of Ukraine, the United States and Russia, planned for this week, has been postponed. The reason is the situation in Iran and around it. However, the war in the Middle East did not prevent a phone conversation between the US President Donald Trump and Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. The American leader said the conversation was good and that his counterpart wants to act very constructively. According to Trump, Putin even told him he would like to be helpful in the Middle East, to which the US president reportedly replied that Putin could be much more helpful if he ended the war in Ukraine. Of course, we can assume the conversation went exactly like that. But then another question appears. Why did the call happen at all? What was its real purpose? In my view, a large part of the conversation, the part Trump did not talk about, was likely bargaining. In other words, business negotiations. Against the backdrop of global instability. The thing is, Trump has a powerful tool to pressure Putin. Sanctions, especially those targeting Russian energy exports. Right now, the oil market is complicated. The US president has an interest in stabilizing the situation, especially with midterm elections approaching, when political points matter. One possible option would be to ease sanctions and allow more Russian oil onto the market. But there is another important factor: reputation. If Trump appears to bend to Putin, it could look like weakness. So any sanctions relief would likely have to come with Russian concessions. In other words, they may have been negotiating exactly that. What concessions in exchange for what easing of economic pressure? And there is one more thing. With a very high probability, no matter what agreements are reached, Putin will break his word. So we continue watching how events unfold. Meanwhile, Putin's rating, according to the Russian Public Opinion Research Center, has dropped to its lowest level since the beginning of the full-scale war. Fewer than one-third of Russians say they trust the war criminal. More on this in the report.
Putin and his power and authority are weakening with each passing day. Putin's approval rating has reached its lowest point since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Less than a third of the population trusts him.
Regardless of those individuals who would like to imagine Russia as weakened, as you are likely well aware since you are American, I want to recall a very famous historical figure and writer who famously once remarked in the past, "The reports of my death are greatly exaggerated."
Over the past 2 years, one after another, dictators and Putin's closest friends have been falling around the world. Syrian Bashar Assad is hiding in Moscow after the coup.
Despite the traumatic situation in your country, you nevertheless responded to our request and came to Russia.
Putin, who had promised Assad all kinds of support, including military support, tucked his tail between his legs and declared that the so-called terrorists in Syria, as he himself called them, are now potential partners. In
accordance with your request,
we made a decision and are providing effective assistance to the Syrian people in their fight against international terrorism, which has unleashed a real war against Syria. Even those groups that once fought against Assad's regime, against government forces, have also undergone internal changes. It's no coincidence that today many European countries and the United States want to establish relations with them, even though they are terrorist organizations.
so why are you getting involved there?
That means they have changed, haven't they?
And that means, to a certain extent, the goal has been achieved.
Others, the so-called allies of Putin, have been less fortunate. For example, to his dear friend Maduro, to whom Putin promised the same as he did to Assad.
The continued and robust strengthening of the Russian-Venezuelan strategic partnership across all sectors of mutual cooperation undoubtedly serves the fundamental interests of the prosperous and harmonious long-term development of both our countries. Dear friend and colleague, once again I offer my warmest congratulations to you and the entire Venezuelan people on this historic anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between our two nations.
Now Maduro is sitting in an American prison, and all the Russians could manage was whining about how the US doesn't follow some laws. Laws, by the way, that Russians themselves don't care about when it comes to their own interests.
We have witnessed unprecedented events, a blatant armed invasion. Take Venezuela, with dozens killed and wounded, with the leaders captured and the country's legitimate president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife taken out of the country. Well,
and of course, the indispensable friend Iran, which gave Russia invaluable assistance in the war with Ukraine, ended up left out in the cold. And
we have developed very good relations with Iran, both as a state, with the Iranian people, and with the Iranian leadership.
Personally, I don't see any.
Iran also has a strategic agreement with Russia, but after the elimination of Ali Khamenei, the Russians not only did not enter the war, they didn't even directly protest to either the US or Israel and simply switched to a peace dove mode.
they are categorically against hostilities as such. They must cease immediately. But of particular importance is the exclusion of any actions that create threats to the lives of civilians, which are attacks on civilian infrastructure. So far, we do not see such clarity regarding the goals of our American colleagues. But under all circumstances, we remain open to dialogue with them and with Israel. We have never broken off this dialogue.
Next up is Cuba. This has already been announced by US President Trump. But most likely even here, apart from extreme concern from the Russians, nothing else should be expected.
I wanted to wait a couple of weeks, but I suspect we'll soon be together again to celebrate what's happening in Cuba.
They want to make a deal so badly you can't even imagine.
Although the Russian Foreign Ministry once again enthusiastically promised comprehensive assistance. We
are convinced that the language of blackmail and threats against the island of freedom, its people and its government is absolutely counterproductive. That is why we will support the Cuban people in these extremely difficult times, to the extent that it is necessary.
There are fewer and fewer dictators in Putin's circle. Of course, there are still some left. China, which is obviously profiting from Russia instead of providing real help.
We consider President Xi Jinping to be a truly reliable friend and a very stable partner. He is my reliable friend, a steadfast and stable partner, and a vital long-term ally of the Russian Federation.
And this is the most important foundation for the development of our Russian-Chinese relations.
Belarusian Lukashenko, who is of little use, and also North Korean Kim, to whom Putin also promised to join the war if necessary, but by now it is obvious to everyone that this is a lie.
The Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement signed today also provides a framework for mutual assistance in the event of aggression against one of the parties to this document.
Putin grows weaker with every new fall of his associates, and he is definitely afraid of what fate awaits him because he could be next. He will have nowhere to run like Syrian Assad, and he certainly won't end up in a democratic American prison like Venezuela's Maduro. And perhaps for him, it would be pure luck if he were finished off by a swift missile strike like Iran's Khamenei.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become a sponsor. Now's the time to subscribe, like this video and share it so more people can see it. Thank you and glory to Ukraine. Now back to the war in the Middle East and its possible impact on Ukraine. A new escalation in the region, Iran launched ballistic missiles at a German airbase in Jordan, where US Air Force units are also stationed. This was reported by Der Spiegel. Barracks were damaged, but no soldiers were injured because they were in shelters at the time of the strike. Already 11 countries have asked Ukraine for help in countering Shahed drones. Right now, Kyiv is deciding how to distribute its resources without weakening its own defense capabilities. Still, one thing is clear. Events in the Middle East and the Persian Gulf region are already affecting Ukraine, including the critically important supply of military equipment and ammunition. More details in the report.
4 years from Help Us Close the Sky over Ukraine to Help Us Ukrainians. The countries of the Middle East can't cope, nor can the Americans. Only Ukraine has proven capable of countering Iran. As a result, official Kyiv was approached for support and Ukraine did not stand aside. Ukrainian specialists are traveling together with countermeasure equipment to the countries of the Persian Gulf.
We understand what is happening, what kind of war is there. We discussed some details regarding the strikes on the Gulf countries. We expect that we will coordinate. In Europe, we are also coordinating with certain states to ensure that Europe's interests are protected and so that the destabilization around Iran does not lead to an increase of problems in Europe.
For now, it is only about sending Ukrainians to Jordan to guard American bases, but it is likely that over time Ukraine's assistance will be scaled up. Volodymyr Zelensky reported that there are already 11 requests from countries neighboring Iran, European states and America for assistance in countering Iranian drones. The goal is noble, but such assistance also carries risks. The main fear is, are we weakening our own capabilities with these actions? Our own capability. And this risk really does exist, but we also cannot abandon the countries of the Middle East. Firstly, thanks to the countries of the Persian Gulf, prisoner exchanges are taking place. And Ukraine will not forget this assistance. But secondly, it's time to move beyond statements of deep concern and start helping with real actions. Who, if not Ukrainians, know how important this is?
We fully understand that our war is a fundamentally different and unprecedented type of conflict. And our experience is entirely unique in the modern era. If we appeal to the fact that we are fighting against a pervasive global evil that threatens the very foundations of democracy, to the idea that other countries should be more deeply involved in our struggle, both in terms of immediate assistance and long-term future investments, then, of course, we must clearly demonstrate this commitment through our actions. And our global mindset is manifested precisely in such significant things.
Altruism is far from the only reason for sending Ukrainian specialists and drone countermeasure systems. There is also a pragmatic side to this coin. In the future, such assistance could turn into income for Ukraine. The Persian Gulf countries are countries with a lot of money.
They gradually came to the realization that various Russian defense systems, for the purpose of fighting drones, that is, to actively compete for total dominance and control of the lower airspace, systems like the Panzer have proven to be not nearly as effective as they had originally anticipated. And this is an unprecedented opportunity for the Saudis to finally move away from and abandon these expensive Russian systems, and instead begin making significant investments into our own American-made production and directly into our domestic defense industry, including for themselves, but for us, it's additional money for us.
But thoughts about the future are not so comforting when the threat is looming right now. Hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles are flying toward Ukraine every day. And while Ukraine has learned to counter UAVs, countering ballistic missiles remains a difficult issue for Ukrainian defense capability. Everything depends on the help of Western allies. If you look at the statistics on missile usage, compared to the Middle East, the numbers for Patriots are not encouraging at all. According to official data provided by the President's office, throughout the entire war, Kyiv has received only 600 missiles for this American air defense system. Whereas in just the first days of the war in Iran, Middle Eastern countries use more than 800 Patriot missiles. And perhaps assistance in fighting drones in the Middle East will help Ukraine receive more missiles for air defense systems.
The more drones are shot down by our interceptors, with the help of our extensive technical knowledge and advanced technologies, the more we can utilize a significantly larger number of Patriots.
Official Kyiv also expects that, in exchange for assistance, Middle Eastern countries will provide diplomatic support in pressuring Russia toward a ceasefire. In
the countries of the Middle East, there are levers of influence over the Russian elites. We remember that their families, their real estate, their capital, their registered businesses are located there. In particular, for example, in Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, that is, Russians are present there. And this has been a kind of discreet and secluded sanctuary for various Russian business interests and enterprises, for the illicit laundering of vast sums of money, and for legalizing any and all types of foreign purchases.
The Persian Gulf countries can help put pressure on the Russian Federation not only out of gratitude, but also because they have become unofficial adversaries of Russia. The terrorist state is once again taking up its favorite position. While Ukrainians go to help defend, Russians help to attack. According to the president of Ukraine, there is information that Russians are providing intelligence to Iran to help adjust strikes against Americans. In addition, Russian components are being found in Iranian Shaheds. Isn't that a good reason to put pressure on the Kremlin?
Hungary is sliding into a spiral of lawlessness. The country is preparing a bill that could effectively legalize funds stolen from Ukraine's Sociat Bank. This was stated by Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha. He stressed that Ukraine will hold all those involved accountable, not only for the theft of money, but above all, for the cruel treatment of 7 Ukrainian citizens. And finally, about an inseparable part of Ukraine's identity. On March 10th, the national anthem of Ukraine marks 161 years. Today, its words are heard all around the world. Ukrainians and friends of Ukraine sang it together. A reminder that Ukraine's voice is heard far beyond its borders. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Like, subscribe, comment, share. And see you next time.